The red and blue lights washed over my driveway, flashing sharply through darkness as two patrol cars rolled to a stop in front of my house. From the living room window, I spotted my 16-year-old daughter, Emily, standing frozen on the porch, her overnight bags clutched tightly in her shaking hands. Two officers were slowly approaching her, their hands hovering near their belts, alert but cautious. And just off the side of my property stood Patricia Hawthorne, arms folded, wearing that same smug, self-satisfied smile she always had. What Patricia didn't realize was that tonight, she had made the biggest mistake of her overbearing, power-hungry life. Let me explain. My name is David Garrison, and for the past 12 years, I've served as a circuit court judge here in Jefferson County. After my divorce 3 years ago, my daughter Emily began splitting her time between my home in Maple Ridge and her mother's place across town. It was a simple, smooth arrangement, at least for everyone except Patricia Hawthorne, the ever-watchful president of our HOA, who treated every unfamiliar face like a threat invading sacred ground. Patricia had been running Maple Ridge for 5 years, turning what should have been a standard homeowners association into something closer to her personal regime. She knew every bylaw by heart, enforced every rule obsessively, and seemed to take genuine pleasure in catching residents over even the smallest infractions. Trash bins left out past 6 p.m.? That's a $50 fine. Grass just a little too tall? Another citation. She once fined a neighbor $200 for leaving Christmas lights up until January 3rd. But her favorite obsession was controlling who came and went through the neighborhood. Patricia saw herself as some kind of suburban security officer, constantly hovering near the entrance gates, interrogating delivery drivers, following unfamiliar vehicles, even taking photos like an amateur detective. Most of us simply ignored her behavior, deciding it wasn't worth the effort to challenge her. That changed the day she targeted my daughter. Emily had just arrived for her usual weekend visit. Her mother dropped her off at the gate like always, and she walked the short 2-block distance to my house, a routine she'd followed dozens of times before. I was in my home office, reviewing files for a case scheduled Monday morning, when I heard something unusual outside. At first, I thought it was just kids playing, but then I caught the unmistakable crackle of police radios. I immediately got up and rushed to the front door. There was Emily, standing in front of my house, surrounded by 2 officers. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to explain that she lived here, that I was her father, but Patricia wouldn't let her speak. Her sharp, self-righteous voice cut through the air like nails scraping across glass. "I saw her sneaking around the back of the house," Patricia said, gesturing dramatically. She was clearly casing the place. "I've never seen her before, and I know everyone here. She's obviously some troubled teenager trying to break in while the homeowners are away." The officers exchanged uncertain glances, clearly skeptical but still cautious. One of them, a calm woman named Officer Chun, stepped forward in an attempt to ease attention. "Ma'am," she said gently, "she claims she lives here. She even has a key." Patricia scoffed loudly. "Of course she has a key. She probably stole it or had a copy made. I've seen this kind of thing on the news. These kids scope out neighborhoods, wait for the right moment, and strike. I'm telling you, I stopped a burglary. You should be thanking me." That was when I stepped outside. "Is there a problem here, officers?" I asked. Patricia's face lit up immediately, like she had been waiting for this exact moment. "Oh, Judge Garrison, thank goodness you're home," she said quickly. "I just caught this girl trying to break into your house." "Don't worry," I called 911 right away. I walked down the porch steps calmly, pulling my wallet from my pocket. "That won't be necessary, officers," I said, handing them my identification. "This is my daughter, Emily. She's here for her scheduled visit." Officer Chin took my ID, along with my judicial credentials, and I could see her posture shift almost instantly. Her partner, a younger officer named Mitchell, straightened slightly in recognition. Both of them knew who I was. I had presided over several cases involving their department. "Judge Garrison," Officer Chin said respectfully, "we apologize for confusion. We received a report of a possible break-in." And just like that, Patricia's confidence began to crack. "Wait, what? That can't be right," she stammered. "I've never seen this girl before. She can't possibly." Miss Hawthorne, I interrupted firmly, my voice carrying the same authority it does in my courtroom. This is my daughter, Emily. She has been visiting me every other weekend for the past 3 years. If you've never noticed her, that reflects more on your awareness than her right to be here. Patricia's face flushed red. Well, how was I supposed to know? She snapped offensively. She was acting suspiciously, walking around the back of the house. The back? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. You mean the path from the street to the front door? The one she uses because the side gate is locked. Emily finally managed to speak, her voice trembling. I tried to tell her, Dad, she said quietly. I told her I was your daughter, but she just yelled at me to leave the property, and then she called the police. Officer Mitchell was already writing in his notepad. Miss Hawthorne, he asked, did she identify herself to you before you called 911? Patricia hesitated, her mouth opening and closing awkwardly. Well, she might have said something, she admitted, but I didn't believe her. Anyone could claim that. I was just being careful. You can't be too careful these days. Officer Chen's expression hardened slightly. Actually, ma'am, you can be, she said. Filing a false police report is a serious matter. You called 911 to report a burglary in progress. I added calmly, though my tone was sharp, when what you actually saw was a teenager entering her father's home with permission. It wasn't false, Patricia insisted weakly. I genuinely believed. You genuinely believed. I cut in. That harassment could pass as responsibility. Tell me, Miss Hawthorne, how many other residents' children have you reported? How many innocent visitors have you subjected to this kind of treatment? The officers exchanged glances again, clearly uncomfortable. It was obvious this wasn't their first run-in with Patricia's overzealous behavior. Officer Mitchell flipped through his notes. Actually, Judge Garrison, he said carefully, we responded to several calls from Ms. Hawthorne over the past year. Most of them turned out to be false alarms. Patricia's composure began to crumble. I'm just trying to keep the neighborhood safe, she said, though her voice had lost its earlier confidence. No, I replied evenly. You're trying to control it. And today, you cross a line. You didn't just harass a visitor. You traumatized a minor. My daughter. Officer Chin stepped forward again, her tone now fully official. Miss Hawthorne, I'm issuing a formal warning for misuse of emergency services. This incident will be documented. Continued false reports could result in criminal charges. Patricia's face drained of color. You can't do that, she said weakly. I'm the HOA president. I have responsibilities. Your responsibility, I said coldly, is to manage the neighborhood and enforce legitimate HOA rules. Nowhere in those bylaws are you authorized to act as law enforcement. And I should know. I reviewed them thoroughly before purchasing this home. I turned back to the officers. I will be filing formal complaints, not only with your department, but with the HOA board as well. This behavior needs to be addressed properly. That is your right, your honor. Officer Chin replied with a respectful nod. Then she turned to Patricia. Ma'am, I suggest you familiarize yourself with what constitutes an actual emergency. Misusing police resources is a serious offense. As the officers returned to their vehicles, Patricia stood motionless in the fading glow of their taillights. A few neighbors had gathered during the commotion, and as they slowly dispersed, I noticed more than a few satisfied looks and approving nods. It seemed I wasn't the only one who had grown tired of Patricia's rule. This isn't over, Patricia muttered, trying to recover. I'll be bringing this up at the next board meeting. Your daughter may be allowed to visit, but there are procedures, guest registrations, notifications. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, let's address that right now. I believe I have board member Jennifer Rodriguez on speed dial. She's an attorney, if you recall. I'm sure she'd be very interested to hear that the HOA president called the police on a resident's child. Patricia's eyes widened. That's not necessary, she said quickly. We can handle this internally. Oh, I think it's very necessary, I replied, scrolling through my contacts. You see, Miss Hawthorne, you've been operating under the assumption that your title gives you unlimited authority. But every system, even a homeowners association, has checks and balances. The following weeks proved to be eventful. True to my word, I filed formal complaints with both the police department and the HOA board. Word spread through Maple Ridge quickly. Patricia Hawthorne, the all-powerful HOA president, had called the police on Judge Garrison's daughter. The same woman who had spent years throwing her authority around had now managed to alienate one of the most respected legal figures in the county. 2 weeks later, the board scheduled an emergency meeting. The clubhouse was completely packed. Every seat was filled, with residents lining the walls, murmuring with anticipation. One by one, people stood up to speak, and it became painfully clear that Patricia's reign had been overdue for an end. Mr. Patterson, an elderly widower, spoke first. He had been fined because his grandson's bicycle sat in the driveway for 10 minutes. Then came the Sharps, who described how Patricia called the police on their family gathering, claiming it was unauthorized. Even quiet Mrs. Foster stood up, her hands shaking, as she spoke about being harassed over the color of her flower bed. Patricia sat at the front table, shrinking with every testimony. Her once commanding presence had collapsed into something small and fragile. When the vote of no confidence was called, the result was unanimous. Not a single person defended her. Even her closest allies on the board could no longer justify her actions. But the consequences didn't end there. After reviewing her history of false reports, the county prosecutor decided to file charges for misuse of emergency services. The irony was impossible to ignore. The woman who constantly called the police was now being summoned by them. On the morning of her arraignment, I saw her in the courthouse hallway. She looked nothing like the confident figure she once was. Her hair was unkempt, her expression hollow. Her attorney, a visibly nervous young man, spoke quietly beside her. 50 hours of community service. I overheard him say, and a $5,000 fine. You'll also be prohibited from holding any HOA leadership position for 5 years. Patricia's face fell apart. $5,000. 5 years removed from the position she had once treated like a throne. Our eyes met briefly as I walked past. I could have said something cutting, something satisfying, but there was no need. The law had already done exactly what it was meant to do. Justice doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly and with absolute certainty. That morning, Patricia Hawthorne entered a plea of no contest. Her voice was barely audible as she accepted the consequences. When the judge listed her penalties, community service, the fine, and the leadership ban, her shoulders slumped. $5,000. 5 years of silence. And for the first time in a long time, Maple Ridge Estates finally felt peaceful again,